Jerry Michael Williams, affectionately known as Michael or Mike, hailed from the charming community of Bradfordville, situated just north of Tallahassee. He was the cherished son of a dedicated Greyhound bus driver and a nurturing daycare provider, who together raised him and his elder brother Nick in a cozy double-wide trailer. Rather than investing in a traditional home, his parents prudently saved their resources, enabling both boys who contributed by working evening shifts at local supermarkets to attend the esteemed North Florida Christian High School. There, Mike flourished, taking on the role of student council president, excelling in football, and actively participating in the Key Club. At the tender age of 15, he discovered a passion for duck hunting, which led him to form a meaningful connection with fellow student Denise Morell. Following his time at North Florida Christian, Mike pursued higher education at Florida State University, majoring in political science and urban planning. Before completing his degree, he secured a position with Ketchum Appraisal Group as a property appraiser, where he quickly earned a reputation as the hardest working man I ever saw, as noted by the company's owner. After marrying Denise in 1994, he often returned home for dinner, resuming work after she and later their daughter had gone to bed, and sometimes even heading to the office after a morning of duck hunting. By the time of his mysterious disappearance, Mike was reportedly earning an impressive annual salary of $200,000. He and Denise had invested in a lovely home within a quaint upscale subdivision on the city's east side. In 1999, they welcomed their only child, a daughter, and his colleagues remarked on his unwavering devotion to her, mirroring his commitment to his career. Tragically, the following year marked the passing of his father. Midway through that year, the couple took out a $1 million life insurance policy on Mike through Brian Winchester, a childhood friend of Denise who had also become close to her husband. Later that year, Mike consoled his mother, expressing a desire for $50,000 to take a sabbatical the following year. Just 2 days before his disappearance, he and Denise shared with his mother and brother Nick their intentions to expand their family. In 2001, she mentioned that they were intending to embark on a cruise in Hawaii that spring, with plans for him to travel to Jamaica for work later in the year. Denise Williams recounted that on the morning of December 16, 2000, a Saturday, her husband rose early and departed from their home on Centennial Oaks Circle well before dawn, towing a boat for a duck hunting trip at Lake Seminole. This lake, a significant reservoir located approximately 50 miles west-northwest of Tallahassee, lies in the southwestern corner of Georgia along the Florida border, where 3 streams converge to form the Apalachicola River. The couple had intended to celebrate their 6th wedding anniversary that evening in Apalachicola. By noon, Denise contacted her father to inform him that Mike had not yet returned. Brian Winchester, Mike's best friend, along with his father, drove to the lake areas where Mike often hunted ducks. They discovered Mike's 1994 Ford Bronco parked near a secluded boat launch in Jackson County on the Florida side. Following the notification of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, a search was initiated but had to be suspended due to an incoming storm. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission managed the initial investigation, treating it as a case of a missing hunter and concentrating on search and rescue efforts. Deputies from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office were present but primarily provided support. Search efforts concentrated on the 10 acres of the lake surrounding the cove where Williams's vehicle was located. A helicopter pilot soon located his boat approximately 225 feet from the ramp, initially mistaking it for a search vessel. Upon retrieving the boat, investigators found Williams's shotgun still in its case, but no trace of Williams himself. Locally, the cove is believed to have once been an orchard before the damming of the Chattahoochee and Flint Rivers and Spring Creek to create the lake. Stump Field derives its name from the numerous stumps that rise above and dip below the water's surface, necessitating meticulous navigation for any powerboat traversing the area. Consequently, it was presumed that Williams had struck one of these stumps, leading to his fall into the depths of 8 to 12 feet, where his waders filled with water, ultimately resulting in his drowning as he struggled to free himself. Typically, had Williams succumbed to the water, his body would have been expected to rise to the surface, facilitating its recovery. Investigators reassured the Williams family that, akin to other drowning victims, his remains would likely emerge within 3 to 7 days, possibly extending slightly longer due to the cold front that followed the initial storm. Yet, no body was ever located. As the search extended into its 10th day, a camouflage-patterned hunting hat was discovered, though it could not be definitively linked to Williams. The search persisted until early February when it was ultimately called off. It has been posited that had Denise Williams expressed a desire for the search to continue, efforts might have been sustained as the case remained open at that juncture. The final report, released in late February 2001, stated, "Nothing in investigative or search and rescue efforts has produced any definitive evidence of a boating accident or a fatality as of this date." There were suggestions that perhaps Williams's body had become ensnared in the thick beds of hydrilla beneath the lake, later to be discovered by alligators, with turtles and catfish consuming what remained. Denise Williams, who had shunned media attention during the search for her husband, ultimately accepted the reality of his death and organized a memorial service for Mike the day following the conclusion of the search. In June, an angler in the Stump Field vicinity stumbled upon a pair of waders adrift in the lake, and divers summoned to investigate subsequently retrieved a lightweight hunting jacket and a flashlight from the lake's depths. Within one of the jacket's pockets lay a hunting license bearing Williams's name and signature. The absence of teeth marks or any signs of damage on the waders was notable. None of the retrieved items bore evidence of having been submerged for the duration of Williams's disappearance, and no DNA was found to connect the clothing to him. Nevertheless, a week later, a judge in Leon County approved Denise Williams's request to have Mike declared legally dead, based on the recovered items and the presumption that alligators and aquatic life had entirely consumed the body. This judicial ruling enabled Denise to swiftly pursue claims on her husband's life insurance policies, resulting in a payout of $1.5 million. 5 years later, she entered into matrimony with Brian Winchester, who had sold Mike some of those policies shortly before his vanishing. The couple chose to reside in the same home that Denise had shared with Mike. Both Denise and Brian have largely refrained from publicly discussing the case. Cheryl remained unconvinced that her son had perished in the lake, yet her efforts to instigate a further investigation proved fruitless. She reported receiving threats aimed at dissuading her. For several years, she conducted her own inquiries while managing a daycare from her home. She placed advertisements in local newspapers and erected billboards to solicit information. All subsequent investigations into the case stemmed from her relentless efforts, as she held onto the belief that her son might still be alive. In 2004, following Cheryl Williams's advocacy alongside a friend, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement agreed to reopen the case. Typically, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement does not have jurisdiction over missing person cases and cannot engage in investigations solely based on a citizen's request, though it can provide assistance to local agencies, as it did in this instance. In hindsight, many officers concurred that the circumstances surrounding Michael Williams' apparent drowning 4 years earlier were indeed peculiar. Investigators also discovered that Williams typically did not hunt alone. Certain elements appeared rather peculiar from the outset, remarked Arnett of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, who had initially perceived the scenario as a standard case of a missing hunter potentially involved in a boating mishap. The The notion that Williams had succumbed to drowning took on a more serious tone when investigators discovered that alligators typically refrain from feeding during the winter months due to the drop in temperature. However, the renewed investigation faced significant challenges stemming from the inadequacies of the initial search, which had overlooked the possibility of foul play. Williams' Bronco and the boat had been returned to his family and friends, while the multitude of volunteers and searchers had trampled the lakeshore, rendering it impossible to gather any evidence from that location. Furthermore, the items later retrieved from the lake had not been preserved. Lacking this crucial evidence or Williams's remains, law enforcement found themselves unable to build a case. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement ultimately closed its investigation, convinced that the alligator theory was unfounded, yet without any leads or evidence to pursue further inquiries. By 2006, the cold case investigators had ceased responding to Cheryl Williams's calls. Undeterred, she sought to keep the case in the public eye, placing advertisements in the Tallahassee Democrat. A potential new lead surfaced in October 2007, when Michael Williams's elder brother discovered a photograph and the serial number of a .22 caliber Ruger pistol that had once belonged to their father. Michael had inherited this firearm following their father's passing, and after he was declared legally dead, it was the only one of his guns that Denise Williams had not returned to her former in-laws. Following an inquiry from Jackson County Sheriff's investigator Wester, the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms was contacted to locate the weapon. Agents subsequently visited Denise and Brian Winchester, now married, at their residence, the same home she had shared with Michael, to conduct interviews. A few days later, their attorney presented the firearm to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. The evidence was dispatched to a state forensics laboratory for DNA analysis, yet the results remain undisclosed. On the anniversary of Williams's disappearance that year, the Winchesters issued one of their rare public statements regarding the case. For 7 years, we have fervently prayed and hoped to uncover the truth about Mike's fate, Brian conveyed in an email to the Democrat, adding, "No one desires to find Mike more than we do." Whispers circulated throughout Tallahassee, suggesting that a grand jury had been reviewing evidence and was poised to issue indictments. However, by the 8th anniversary of Williams's disappearance, the Department of Investigations and Forensics had closed the case. Despite the unsuccessful third investigation into her son's fate, Cheryl Williams remained undeterred. Her relentless pursuit of justice culminated in a segment on investigation discovery, which aired in late 2011, focusing on Michael's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. "We may not know what the definitive evidence is, but we remain hopeful that someone will uncover it," she expressed. By that time, her faith in the Florida Department of Law Enforcement had waned, as she suspected either incompetence or a lack of interest in resolving the case. She particularly believed that the investigation was compromised by the involvement of Agent Mike Phillips, a friend of both her son and his then-wife. Phillips had initially suggested to her that Michael might have fallen prey to alligators, leading her to assume he was actively involved in the investigation. He later clarified that he had never been part of it and was merely attempting to offer her comfort. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement maintained that his role was limited to inquiring whether the agency could assist in the search, deeming a formal investigation into his involvement unnecessary. Beginning on New Year's Day in 2012, Cheryl embarked on a campaign of writing one letter each day to Governor Rick Scott, imploring him to either assign a different agency to investigate or appoint a special prosecutor. After penning over 200 letters without even a hint of acknowledgement, she began to seek answers personally regarding the lack of response. The governor's office had, rather astonishingly, sent the documents to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's headquarters without even opening them, where they were subsequently added to the case file. This revelation left her incensed. In 2012, Denise and Brian Winchester ended their marriage, reportedly due to his struggles with sex addiction, and she initiated divorce proceedings in 2015. Initially resistant, Brian was ultimately compelled to comply with the divorce order. As part of this mandate, he was required to submit an appraisal of their home, due by early August 2016. On August 5th, the very day the appraisal was to be filed with the court, Denise recounted to investigators from the Leon County Sheriff's Office that she had left her residence to head to her position at Florida State University. While engaged in a phone conversation with her sister, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her vehicle. It was Brian. He seized her phone and began to shout commands at her. It was only when he brandished a firearm that she acquiesced. He later justified his actions by claiming it was necessary because she had been ignoring his calls and blocking his messages. Rather than following his intended route, she maneuvered into a CVS parking lot, conveniently located near the entrance. Brian expressed his intention to take his own life with the gun, revealing his despair over the impending divorce and his belief that he had nothing left to live for. He reassured her that he had no desire to harm her. Denise managed to soothe him and drove him back to the location where he had parked his truck in a nearby park. Before departing, he retrieved a tan sheet, a differently colored plastic sheet, a spray bottle of bleach, and a tool from her vehicle. After she left, Brian approached her to apologize for his behavior. Despite her promise to keep the incident confidential, she drove directly to the police afterward. A friend of Winchester's, later interviewed by authorities, expressed that he had grown increasingly anxious that Denise might disclose information about a long-ago incident involving this guy who died 10 or 12 or 15 years ago as a consequence of their divorce. Feeling ignored by her, he devised a plan to confront her in her car, holding her at gunpoint. Brian found himself in the grips of the law, facing serious charges including kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary, with 2 of these offenses classified as felonies. Denise, deeply concerned for her safety and that of her daughter, sought protection orders. During a subsequent hearing, she conveyed her distress, stating that the traumatic incident had robbed her of both appetite and sleep. In light of her testimony, the court opted to detain Brian without the possibility of bond. Cheryl Williams expressed a glimmer of hope that this turn of events might pave the way for answers regarding her son's mysterious disappearance. In December 2017, Winchester was sentenced to 2 decades in prison for the kidnapping, receiving credit for 502 days already served, followed by a lengthy probation period of 15 years. He is currently incarcerated at the Wakulla Correctional Institution. Notably, the Williams case was not addressed during Brian Winchester's sentencing. However, State Attorney Jack Campbell shared with the press his aspiration that the proceedings against Winchester would aid in unraveling the circumstances surrounding that disappearance. Reports later surfaced indicating that Winchester had struck a deal with prosecutors before sentencing, which included an agreement not to pursue a life sentence for the kidnapping charge or to present certain evidence during the hearing. The specifics of what this agreement entailed beyond his guilty plea remain undisclosed. The following day, at a press conference, Mark Perez, the special agent in charge of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, informed the gathered media that the remains of Williams had been discovered, confirming him as a homicide victim. However, authorities withheld details regarding the manner of his death, potential suspects, or the location of the body, asserting that such information should remain known only to the perpetrators. Eventually, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement disclosed that Mike Williams's remains were located at the end of Gardner Road in northern Leon County, a mere 5 miles from his childhood home, with identification confirmed through a match to his mother's DNA. No further information was released. Following the arrest of Denise Williams, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that they had received crucial information regarding the location of the body in early October 2017. County Public Works personnel were summoned with backhoes under the pretense of conducting a training exercise. Over 5 grueling 16-hour days, they excavated 9-foot-deep holes in the muddy terrain by the lake, all while managing the lake's waters with dams and pumps, contending with the ever-present eels and water moccasins. As the search progressed, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement decided to enlist a private contractor to complete the task. On October 18th, a dedicated team of search dogs and officers uncovered the remains of Mike Williams amidst the mounds of dirt resting on plywood sheets. A Florida Department of Law Enforcement source disclosed to the Tallahassee Democrat that an impressive 98% of his bones were recovered, remarkably well preserved, along with some of his clothing, including winter gloves and booties. 2 DNA tests confirmed the identity of the remains, matching them to his mother's sample. On May 8, 2018, Denise Williams was apprehended at Florida State University as she exited her workplace to celebrate her daughter's 19th birthday, mere moments after a grand jury had indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact. Prosecutors opted to withhold specific details of the crime, indicating they would reveal them in court at the appropriate time, while also stating their intention to seek her denial of bail. Denise's attorney refrained from commenting, citing a lack of time to review the case. Meanwhile, her estranged husband, Winchester, was serving his sentence at Wakulla Correctional Institution near Tallahassee. His attorney expressed that Winchester would testify at trial if legally required, though he did not anticipate any charges against him in this matter. Immediately following the indictment, 2 Florida Department of Law Enforcement officers visited Cheryl Williams' residence to deliver the news, but she chose not to address the media regarding her reaction. The 3-page indictment was subsequently made public 2 days later. Prosecutors have indicated that Denise allegedly began her conspiracy with Winchester in March 2000, a mere 9 months before the mysterious disappearance of her first husband. It is claimed that Winchester fatally shot Michael. The accessory charge implies that between August 2014 and the date of Winchester's sentencing, Denise purportedly assisted him in evading prosecution or arrest for this grave offense. Ethan Way, representing Denise, maintains her innocence regarding all allegations. In late June 2018, Denise Williams was remanded without bond, with her trial scheduled for September 24th. During the proceedings, audio from Brian Winchester's interview with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement was presented, wherein he confessed to the act of pulling the trigger, asserting that the idea to kill Michael originated with Denise. Her defense contended that this tape should not have been considered as evidence, given that Winchester faced no charges, despite his admission. However, the prosecution argued that it merely sought the truth of the events. Denise's trial commenced in December. Kathy Thomas, Winchester's first wife, testified before the jury, expressing her suspicions of an affair between Denise and Brian during the late 1990s when they often double-dated Mike and Denise. In his recorded confession, which was played for the jury, Brian revealed that the affair began in 1997 and escalated rapidly. After discreetly rekindling their relationship, they contemplated eliminating Mike to facilitate their marriage, as Denise's family held strong religious objections to divorce. Denise proposed orchestrating a boating accident in the Gulf of Mexico, where both Mike and Kathy Thomas could be disposed of, but Winchester hesitated to harm the mother of his children. After dismissing a plan to stage a murder at Mike's workplace disguised as a robbery, Winchester conceived the notion of a hunting accident, inspired by a previous incident where he rescued Mike from quicksand during a hunting trip in Arkansas. On the day of Michael's disappearance, Winchester lured him to Lake Seminole. On the tranquil waters, he had persuaded Mike to don the waders, then callously pushed him from the boat, believing he would succumb to the depths and drown. However, Mike defied expectations, managing to reach a nearby tree stump. In a moment of cold calculation, Winchester discharged a single shotgun blast, striking Mike fatally in the face. With the pretense of a boating accident now shattered, Winchester concealed the body in a remote location, later discovered by authorities. He meticulously cleaned his truck and attended a family Christmas gathering, where he learned of the ongoing search for Mike. Following the tragic incident, he and Denise adopted a cautious approach, allowing the insurance funds to accrue interest while deflecting any suspicion. In February 2019, Denise received a life sentence, remaining silent and offering no defense. The only voice in the courtroom, apart from the legal representatives, was that of Cheryl Williams, who proclaimed that justice had been served, lamenting the loss of both her son and granddaughter. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter, Ansley, inherited her father's estate and insurance proceeds after Denise relinquished her claims to evade prosecution for 3 counts of insurance fraud. As part of the agreement, Ansley is prohibited from using the funds for her mother's legal expenses. Any violation would incur a penalty of $150,000 to the state. Denise now resides at the Florida Women's Reception Center. In January 2020, she sought to appeal her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney contended before the Florida First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence linking her to the murder. In November 2020, while the murder conviction was overturned, the conspiracy to commit murder charge was upheld, along with the accompanying 30-year sentence.
In the elegant confines of the Willow Grove apartment building on Grove Avenue in Willoughby, Ohio, Mark and Nadine Madger reveled in the joys of parenthood with their cherished infant son, Daniel. At just 25 years of age, Nadine radiated beauty both inside and out, standing gracefully at 5 feet 2 inches and weighing a delicate 110 pounds. Her enchanting smile, complemented by her lustrous brown hair and warm brown eyes, illuminated the lives of those around her. As a devoted stay-at-home mother, Nadine embraced her role with gentle affection, placing her family at the pinnacle of her priorities. The trio flourished in the blissful aftermath of Daniel's arrival until an unimaginable tragedy shattered their idyllic existence on January 11th, 1980. Mark returned home around 5 p.m. after a taxing day at work, only to be confronted with a scene of unspeakable horror within the sanctuary of his own home. The sight of his beloved wife, Nadine, lying lifeless on the dining room floor, brutally stabbed over 40 times with a butcher knife still embedded in her body, left him utterly devastated. Their 6-month-old son, blissfully unaware, played innocently in his playpen just a few feet away, untouched by the chaos that had unfolded. In shock, Mark dialed 911 to report the harrowing incident. Upon arrival, detectives from the Willoughby Police Department meticulously examined the crime scene, quickly deducing that there had been no forced entry. This was not a case of robbery, as nothing had been taken from the apartment. The murder weapon, a knife belonging to the Madger household, remained at the scene, while another knife from the set was mysteriously absent. Following the transfer of Nadine's body to the medical examiner's office, the autopsy revealed that, while no sexual assault had occurred, the ferocity of the attack suggested a crime driven by deep-seated passion. The investigation established that Nadine had met her tragic fate sometime between 1:15 p.m. and 4:45 p.m. Coincidentally, a neighbor had reported seeing a striking canary yellow Dodge Dart parked at the rear of the apartment complex around that time. Although the crime scene yielded few clues, one significant piece of evidence remained. The bloodstains on Nadine's shirt would prove pivotal in the unfolding investigation. The blood of the assailant revealed a crucial detail. He had sustained injuries during the attack, leaving traces of his blood on Nadine's shirt. The blood appeared as perpendicular droplets, indicating that the suspect was positioned above Nadine while he bled. A DNA profile was meticulously extracted from the blood found on her shirt. Law enforcement diligently interviewed and compared every potential suspect against this DNA profile, yet their efforts yielded no results. Regrettably, the investigation grew cold for several years. In 2018, however, the Willoughby Police Department rekindled the case by collaborating with Parabon Nanolabs, Inc., a Virginia-based firm renowned for its expertise in genetic genealogy to identify suspects through ancestral connections. The suspect's DNA was entered into two prominent databases, GIDmatch and Family Tree DNA, where it was cross-referenced with registered users. Several distant familial matches emerged, prompting the creation of a family tree that ultimately led to a man named Stephen Joseph Simcak. A former U.S. Marine, Simcak lived in New York with his wife and had no prior criminal record. Between 1963 and 2002, he resided on Sunset Drive in Eastlake, Ohio. Notably, during the period surrounding Nadine's murder, Simcak was employed at the Lincoln Electric Company, where he had only reported sick once, in 1980, coinciding with the day of Nadine's tragic death. Furthermore, it was noted that in 1980 he drove a canary yellow Dodge Dart, identical to the vehicle seen near the crime scene. In 2022, investigators located and reached out to one of Simcak's adult children. Although unaware of his father's past, the son consented to provide a DNA sample. This sample was analyzed by Parabon Nanolabs, and after a thorough examination, it was definitively matched to the DNA found on Nadine's shirt, identifying Simcak as the perpetrator of Nadine Madger's murder. The motive behind this atrocious act remains shrouded in mystery. Investigators remain in the dark regarding whether Simcak had any prior acquaintance with the victim or if the act was premeditated. Sadly, these uncertainties will forever cast a shadow, as Simcak departed from this world due to natural causes in 2018. Mark Madger, Nadine's husband, has expressed that he harbors no animosity towards the Simcak family, yet he wishes for them to comprehend the true nature of Simcak. He poignantly remarked, "If there's a hell, I know he's in it, and I hope he rots there." Meanwhile, Nadine's son, Daniel, now 42, has voiced his frustration that the perpetrator evaded justice, passing away as a free man. Nevertheless, he finds a measure of solace in finally being able to identify the individual responsible for his mother's tragic fate. Lori Houts graced the world with her presence on February 6, 1967, in the vibrant city of Las Vegas, Nevada, as the third of four siblings. From a young age, she held her family and friends in the highest regard, reciprocating the affection they bestowed upon her. A distinguished student at Gunderson High School in San Jose, California, Lori excelled academically while also immersing herself in various sports. Her passion for technology set her apart, propelling her into a promising future. Ultimately, she secured a prestigious engineering role at the renowned Adobe Systems, leading her to the heart of innovation in Silicon Valley, where she resided in a chic apartment on Charleston Road in Santa Clara County. It was also reported that she enjoyed a devoted relationship with a boyfriend, whose identity remains undisclosed. Tragically, on September 5, 1992, Lori departed for work but never reached her destination. That fateful day, a jogger stumbled upon a harrowing scene on the 1300 block of Crittenden in Mountain View, now home to Google's campus. Inside her vehicle, a woman was discovered lifeless in the passenger seat near a refuse site. Authorities were alerted, and the victim was identified as the 25-year-old Lori Houts. A nylon rope was still encircling her neck, indicating a brutal strangulation. The crime scene yielded few leads for investigators. However, latent footprints were uncovered both within and outside her vehicle. Notably, Lori's footprints were found on the dashboard, suggesting a violent struggle had ensued. Remarkably, it was not a robbery, as her wallet lay undisturbed nearby. Lori was discovered a mere 2 miles from her workplace. Initially, investigators considered her boyfriend a prime suspect, but he was soon exonerated when his fingerprints did not match those found in Lori's car. Instead, the prints corresponded to another individual closely associated with him, his roommate, John Kevin Woodward. John emerged as a potential assailant, with his fingerprints discovered in Lori's vehicle, coupled with a plausible motive. In a tale steeped in intrigue, it is said that John harbored a certain disdain for Lori, tinged with jealousy as his affections grew for his roommate, who happened to be her boyfriend. Lori's remarkable achievements in the male-dominated tech industry of the 1990s only served to exacerbate his feelings of resentment. When questioned by Lori's boyfriend about the possibility of his involvement in her death, John evaded a direct response, instead inquiring about the investigators' findings, a behavior that raised eyebrows and suspicion alike. A month following the tragic event, John Woodward found himself in the grips of law enforcement, charged with murder. During the trial in 1995, his defense argued that his fingerprints had inadvertently found their way onto Lori's vehicle, which had been parked near his residence days before the incident. The prosecution, however, could not establish his presence within the car. The initial trial ended in a hung jury, leading to a second trial in 1996, which similarly concluded without resolution, resulting in a mistrial. A judge ultimately dismissed the charges, citing the absence of new evidence as a barrier to re-prosecution. In the wake of these events, John relocated to the Netherlands. Despite the lingering suspicions and early investigative efforts, the case grew cold, though it remained open. Fast forward 30 years, and advancements in DNA technology allowed detectives to link John Woodward, now a 58-year-old CEO of a software firm, to the murder of Lori Houts. New evidence extracted from the original crime scene was matched against John's DNA, revealing a connection through the DNA found on the rope that had bound Lori's neck. In July 2022, following a tip-off regarding John's return to the United States, authorities apprehended him at JFK Airport upon his arrival. He is currently detained in New York, awaiting extradition to California, where he faces the prospect of life imprisonment if convicted. The family expressed that while this arrest does not bring their sister back, they remain hopeful for the justice that has long eluded them.